Week 18 can definitely be a bit messy for NFL DFS, but I do still think that given the number of teams with high motivation for this week and the amount of information we've gotten already, it's still a pretty good week to fill out some lineups over on FanDuel.com. We're going to break down who stands out when we dig in and outline motivation, role changes, etc. All the factors to consider. We'll outline what motivation means in Week 18 and get you ready to hopefully fill out some slick lineups to round out the regular season. This is the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Thursday by Brandon Gdula. Check him out on Twitter at Gdula13. He is a senior managing editor for FanDuel Research. Brandon, Week 18 is already here. How you doing today?
I'm great. Lots of information to sift through. A lot of ways to get the analysis paralysis to end the regular season. What could be better?
What could possibly be better than that? And it's definitely a tough slate because we've got a lot of backups moving into bigger roles. And our job is to identify, do those backups have enough upside to justify going their way? And that's not an easy question to answer because the best path to volume or best path to upside is volume, and those guys will get that. But it's still a lot to juggle. So we'll try to break it down for you today, outline teams that are resting players, teams with motivation, what that all means, which value plays we want to trust, and more to get you ready for Week 18. But first, got to mention, Brandon, that our bobblehead is coming down to Week 18 because you defeated me this past week. We had a tie. We had a dead heat in one of the weeks, which means Week 18 will decide who wins. If you're a new listener, the Bobble Hat is our weekly head-to-head. If I win, Brandon knows me a bobblehead as you're watching on FanDuel YouTube or FanDuel TV Plus. The bobbleheads back here, including DeBrickashaw Ferguson, are results of our head-to-head. And Brandon, of course, has like 16 hats behind him that I have bought him as a result of our head-to-head. So how are you feeling entering the final week, the decider of this year?
Well, I let a lead slip away pretty much ever since the tie, which was actually, I think, a 6 versus 6 situation. It wasn't like we had the same lineup, which we almost did. What would that be? Week 15?
The James Cook
went.
Yeah.
Which we had the same lineup, but Jim pivoted to James Cook and he went off and now has used up all his FanDuel points since then, apparently. But I'm feeling good. Clawing my way back, trying to make good decisions. But it's always fun to build head-to-head lineups, as well as the tournament Galaxy Brain lineups and trying to find those game stacks. It's a fun thought process to build those lineups. And thankfully, my wife just bought me a crisp new Bills hat in
honor of James Cook, I assume. Is Sierra on my side? Is that what we're saying here? Like she wanted to needle you for the James Cook thing?
No, she's a fan of good hats and good deals, and so
I'm gonna go with my headcanon instead.
Well, I'm feeling freed up. That's what I'm saying. I just got a new hat.
Okay.
So
playing with house money. Okay.
Yeah.
I got you. Well, we'll break down some thoughts on that. Who are considerations for head-to-head lineups and tournaments and much more throughout the show for today. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts, because we'll be here throughout the postseason, including for the Super Bowl single game slate, all right here the Thursday before each slate, live at 10 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page, and also going up on FanDuel TV Plus after that. We also, of course, do have the Daily ISO with Tom Vecchio every weekday talking NBA DFS, also over on FanDuel TV Plus, and UFC DFS via Austin Swain on the Heat Check as well, all right here in the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We appreciate those of you who have done so already. Also, this is the final week of the free play over at FanDuel Research. Go to FanDuel.com/research. Click the article on the homepage to get the link to the weekly free play. Final week of that is this week. So if you want to play some DFS with no entry fee, go to FanDuel.com/research and click on the link on the homepage to get a link to the free play. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there is still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL, must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms or restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700, visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana, visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit Gambling Helpline ma.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-OPEN-Y or text OPEN-Y in New York. Let's dig in now to our slate overview for week number 18. And Brandon, to me, it comes down to identifying where teams have outright motivation to win, where teams are sitting starters, and whether we can trust guys who are getting more volume as a result, and identifying which value we actually think is worth it, which value does have a path to the ceilings. We do need a ceiling out of our low salaried plays too. So that's the key thing for me, is parsing through the news and deciding which of it is actionable versus which of it is saying, okay, I just won't use that guy as a result. And that's a tough thing for sure. So what's the key to you to this week 18 slate?
Similar, but just so that I don't say the same exact thing you say, kind of trying to figure out how I'm going to be able to build my lineups based on what I'm seeing at wide receiver so far. I think we always disagree, or it sounds like we disagree when we kind of agree, where there are a few names in like the 6,000 range that are viable, Drake London, Chris Godwin, DeAndre Hopkins, but I don't love any of those names. And I don't really love any of the value receivers who might have more extended roles, at least yet. Now, talking through the slate always helps. I maybe see a name or two, think about a game a little bit more, but I need to find that, because if you don't find anyone you really like and you're talking yourself into, again, it sounds like we're different. Drake London, for example, he has a path to upside, but I don't necessarily think he's going to realize his upside necessarily, those kinds of things. So basically, I need to figure out what I'm doing at receiver, because if I need to save enough salary to roster 3 guys at like 7,000 or higher, it does change the rest of how I can build my lineup. So I'm looking for receivers. It's kind of what I'm looking for this week.
Yeah, I agree with that, because it is hard to find guys who are palatable below, the Godwin range, I would say. I think Godwin himself is fine, and I can get okay with that. But like beyond that, like you said, it's pretty tough. I might be a bit higher on Drake London. Well, Christian Kirk we can discuss later on too, but value receiver is tough. I think value or mid-range running back is pretty easy this week. Like there are legitimately 7 running backs in the mid-range I feel pretty good about. So I think to me, that's where I want to pepper. And maybe that impacts my view of the lower salaried backs shifting into larger roles. Like, hey, I can just spend $700 more and get to someone who like I feel good about. And it's an interesting dilemma for sure. And that does impact things for sure. Let's dive in now to motivation. Typically we go injuries first, but I think motivation is kind of the key thing for week 18. And this will be my first trend of the week, is talking about what motivation has done for past DFS perfect lineups. So the best lineup you could have filled out on FanDuel, what's the motivation level of players who wound up in those perfect lineups? So Let's put some data behind that. FanDuel's had a flex spot dating back to 2018. So 5 years of data to work with as of now. In that 5 years, 23 of 45 players in perfect lineups have had something on the line. 19 of those have been high motivation spots, meaning they were playing for either a bye, a division win, or a playoff spot overall. 21 players were on teams eliminated for the playoffs, again, out of 45 total, and only one has come from a team locked into its seed. I think that's enough to cross off the Chiefs, Browns, and almost all the 49ers, depending on Jordan Mason in that backfield. Chiefs and Browns already resting guys, which means starting quarterbacks are Jeff Driscoll, Blaine Gabbert. I almost said Blaine Babbert because I call him that, and it's hard to stop calling him that. Blaine Babbert, starter for the Chiefs. I don't want to tie guys to that. So Jordan Mason's a different discussion, but I'd also be skeptical of the Lions. I know Dan Campbell has said they'll play. We've seen the spread tighten there for the Lions and Vikings to 3.5. It was 5.5 earlier. That to me says there's a chance that the Lions maybe do sit guys. Maybe they start, but then don't finish the game. I think it's pretty risky for them. The Lions could still be the 2 seed technically, but it's a pretty thin path to that. And the Rams, either the 6 or 7 seed, I don't think they care too much, honestly, which one they wind up with there. And they've already said no Matthew Stafford, no Kyron Williams. Most of the players from eliminated teams that made it were not scrubs, so we're not seeing a lot of like randos pop into lineups. You have had guys like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Josh Allen, George Kittle, and Nick Chubb make it in week 18, despite the fact their teams were eliminated. So most of the guys who made it were not backups. We'll see backups get more volume this week, but if that volume comes in bad offenses or with other backups, it's fair to be wary of that volume. So don't cross those guys off, but give some thought as to whether they have the upside to make you regret not using them. Motivation has seemed to matter most at running back and defense. 8 out of 11 running backs in perfect lineups were on teams with high motivation. 4 of 5 defenses had at least something on the line. So I'm not going to cross off limited players at running back. I think there are a couple guys I actually feel pretty good about there, like James Conner and Saquon Barkley, but I will give a decent bump to those fighting for something. Motivations mattered a bit less at other spots. At quarterback, 3 out of 5 quarterbacks have been eliminated. At receiver was 10 out of 18. And at tight end, it is 4 out of 6. There actually was a tight end in the flex one year. One of the others was on a team locked into its seed. So for me, I'm going to weigh motivation, but I'm also not going to make my player pool be exclusively guys with something on the line. I'll weigh it most at running back and defense. I'll weigh it some for sure, quarterback, receiver, and tight end. And if a player on a team that's eliminated is getting more volume, like thrust into a larger role, I'll be skeptical unless I believe they have a path to a true ceiling game. So the teams with high motivation this week are the Bills, Dolphins, Jaguars, Cowboys, Eagles, at least until the Cowboys pull away. I think they should push most of the game, but that's a risk at least. Buccaneers, Saints, Falcons, Packers, and Seahawks. The teams playing for just eating are Lions and Rams. Rams, again, already announced they're resting some starters. And teams locked in their seed are the Chiefs, 49ers, and Browns. So, Brandon, hearing that, any impact for you for the way you want to play things? Any takeaways for you based on what we've seen from past week 18 perfect lineups?
I mean, it's a lot to soak in and apply. And one of the things like we talk about, I mean, we obviously have a trends section on the podcast and we talk about, data and how to implement it, but neither of us is ever going to follow it blindly without thinking about like the repercussions of what that means and what it's telling us. One thing that really jumped out to me that's a little bit backwards, although I guess not necessarily, that motivation matters a lot at running back. I would kind of think it would be the teams that are eliminated might just give the guy like give a third string running back a lot of volume or something. But this all kind of, if you take a step back, it's not that different than how we play the full season, where we still want players in good offenses who have chances to score. Teams that are eliminated probably have the teams that are eliminated probably don't have a whole lot of offensive efficiency expected for them. So as usual, I still want players with projectable workloads. And one thing that I'm not necessarily, are we good? Can you hear me?
Kind of like you sound like a robot to me. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it
Okay.
out, but it's not really working just yet. So,
Okay.
I can like see your mouth moving if that counts, but
All right. I think my all right. I was trying not to draw attention to it, but I'm very, very puzzled by it. So hey, it's week 18.
all
It
right.
is what it is.
So it is week 18 for our technology as well.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk through some injuries here. I might understand what you're saying, but I also might just relaunch my browser and see what happens there.
Okay.
But regardless, let's at least give it a shot here and see.
All right.
Let's talk about some injuries to note for week 18. Bunch of backup quarterbacks going this week, alluded to some of those earlier on. Sam Darnold will start for the 49ers. Christian McCaffrey also out. Carson Wentz will start for the Rams, confirming they're not going to gun hard for the 6th seed. Kyron Williams is sitting there. Blaine Gabbert gets the ball for the Chiefs. Likely no Isaiah Pacheco, Rashee Rice. Travis Kelce might stand to get 1,000 yards, but then dip after that. Jeff Driscoll starts for the Browns. The Rams, again, no Kyron Williams, no Cooper Kupp, no Aaron Donald. That confirms that none of those teams are going to push hard. Personally, I am crossing off every player on these teams other than maybe Jordan Mason for the 49ers. Anybody else you think we should make an exception for on these rosters?
I think Mason's the one to consider. So we'll have to talk about him a little bit more. But I'll just also mention that Chris Conley's salary is 4,200. So
You may have said something I actually don't know. I'm
oh
gonna
my,
dip out of
all
here
right.
and I'll let you talk for a second. If you want to read through the Dolphins notes, I'll come back in a second.
Okay, I'm gonna take the lead here. Something that I don't think I've done in 8 years. Whenever this happens, I just kind of do what I can until Jim comes back in. So bear with me. But Raheem Mostert and Jalen Waddle both missed practice Wednesday after sitting in Week 17. Waddle could miss, but he did take part in a walkthrough on Wednesday. So doors open for the return. Mostert practiced last Friday, but wound up being inactive, leading to a big role for Devon Achane. We're going to talk about the Dolphins in the bookmaker section. For the Eagles, Devontae Smith missed practice Wednesday due to an ankle injury. He was in a walking boot and crutches after Sunday. I think he was still in the boot as of Monday. But it's a huge game for the Eagles. Doesn't look necessarily great for Smith in terms of his playing time expectations. We're going to talk about the Eagles in trends. Even though they could be scoreboard watching, they're one of the more fascinating teams for Week 18. For the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence got in a limited practice after missing Week 17. He's dealing with a shoulder injury. Zay Jones missed that one as well, limited with a knee and hamstring. But the bigger news is that Christian Kirk returned to practice in a limited fashion on Wednesday. He could come off injured reserve, had a groin injury that required surgery. It was pretty gnarly. The description of what he was playing through, I think since week 6. Not going to go over that, but it's been a while that he's been playing through it. So it would make sense if he tries to fight through it, but it would also make sense if they just rest him up once more. His salary is only 4,000 on FanDuel. So again, very, very fascinating spot. We're going to talk more about Kirk and the Jaguars in the trend section, but definitely the type of play who could really open things up and be a very different level of week 18 value play than a reserve player stepping into a bigger role. The Buccaneers are in a must-win game. Baker Mayfield has, I think, a lot of injuries, it seems like, but dealing with a rib injury that he suffered at the end of Week 17, didn't practice Wednesday. Kyle Trask will get the first team reps in practice, but as Jim would definitely want me to point out, it's a revenge game for Baker Mayfield. Sounds like he's going to go. We're going to talk about the Bucs in the trends section. T. Higgins missed practice with a hamstring injury on Wednesday. He was able to return last week after getting that hamstring injury. I think he had a downfield target, but I don't think he was really targeted a ton after that specific injury. The Bengals have been eliminated from the playoffs. Now, Jamar Chase, though, was limited after his shoulder injury last week. As for Chase, the salary of 7,800, it's still appealing. This team's not necessarily phoning it in. Jake Browning's efficiency, if you adjust for opponents faced, has actually been pretty good. The pure volume hasn't been anything like phenomenal. Well, I guess the passing yards have been better than I realized. 197 last week against the Chiefs, 335, 324, 275, 354. But again, like it's the efficiency that's been good, but the touchdowns haven't quite added up. I think you could probably do worse for teams eliminated than going to the Bengals. As for Chase, again, salary 7,800. He's probably not going to project well because he's playing quote unquote like a really tough defense, but going to get some reserves there. And Jamar Chase definitely fits the bill of the type of player who can make the perfect lineup in, a week 18. Not going to surprise anyone if he puts up like 130 yards and a touchdown or two. But it would also not surprise me if, anything gets aggravated that he doesn't necessarily play a full allotment of snaps. So again, there's risk, but there's also reward for someone like Chase. Moving on to the Saints, Alvin Kamara did not practice Wednesday with an ankle injury that he suffered in week 17. Nick Underhill said he thinks that Alvin Kamara has a good shot to go this week. Juwan Johnson's coming off a big game. Didn't practice with a chest injury. Kendre Miller was limited in practice with an ankle injury. He has not played since week 9, but would be in the mix. I think it's safe to say if Kamara did sit. So we got Kamara banged up, Juwan Johnson as well, but we could get Kendre Miller back, and that would kind of make it a little bit complicated for Jamal Williams. This is a must-win game for the Saints. That definitely makes them one of the more interesting teams up here against the Falcons this week. Chris Olave's salary, 7,300. Jim's back.
I can hear you now. You don't sound like a robot. It's weird.
So it's your fault.
Oh, yeah. It was 100% my fault the whole time. I knew that, though.
When's the last time you restarted that computer?
Oh, buddy, I can't tell you that answer. You're asking unanswerable questions. But it sounds great now. We are crystal clear, baby.
I did an internet speed test. I hit speeds that I have never seen in my life before. I'm like,
you tested it while you were doing the injury section?
It was when you were still here. I was like, is this me?
Okay.
No,
it happened before, but it happened pre-show when I was talking to Ed for the power for covering the spread. I restarted and it was immediately fine, so I knew it was me. And professional podcaster.
What was this back in 2017 when you last restarted?
That might have been the last time. Yes.
Well, I'm talking about the Saints right now.
Are you still in the injury section?
Yeah, I was trying to stretch it out. I don't know how long you take.
All right, well, you keep talking. I'm going to get my tabs back open. I trust you. You're just going to handle the whole show if that's okay.
Oh, please no. I stumbled a bit because I had to switch on like the rare times I've done a hosting position.
Yeah.
I have the luxury of self-editing things after the fact. But I'm glad you just write detailed notes. I just read everything that you wrote, but I tried to say it in a way that I would say it as well. So
what are you saying? We say we don't write their talk the same?
Wow. It's close.
Okay.
But...
Okay.
Really? So I'm sure everyone missed this.
So everyone's like, your computer should. We wish that Jim's computer had done an update without prompting here.
Yeah, if you had said like,
hey, it's updating. It'll be 6 hours. See you next week.
I don't know how to shut off the stream. I don't know any of this.
I don't think you can.
I don't think I can either. Yeah.
No, you can't. It would have run forever. It would have been great. Maybe I'll just dip out, let you handle things. Is that okay?
No,
I'll go grab like a churro or something. I don't know.
Isn't it like 6 a.m. Central Time?
It's 9:24. I had to look because I actually wasn't sure what time it was. Anyway, keep talking Saints because I'm going to try to find where you are in the rundown.
Yeah, so I just I was about to gush over Chris Olave once more. I think Chris Olave's been in my loves. If I went back and looked, probably half the season, if not more.
Yeah,
just love the dude. He's apparently become my favorite receiver. He is once again one of my loves this week. Salary of 7,300. indoors, coming off of a down game, just after a 123-yard, 13-target game without a touchdown, which could have been huge. Double-digit FanDuel points a lot in his game log. Juwan Johnson as well, someone that I like a lot. Now, the thing for the running backs is, if I couldn't love Alvin Kamara, it's hard to sell myself on loving Jamal Williams with potentially Kendre Miller. The issue, though, is like if we get Jamal Williams and no Kendre Miller, or even if we get Miller, like, don't you think they're just going to try to lean on Williams in this must-win game because he's a veteran, he's been there, he's already been kind of relevant? But
So they tried that the first game when Williams was healthy, Kamara was out. Kendre Miller was also out for that game. It was back in week 1. And Williams had 18 carries and 2 targets, which is not a great role. And he turned into 52 yards. I just don't know if he has it really from a yardage perspective. So, and like this, the Falcons defense is pretty good against the rush. So personally, I'm okay being low on this backfield pretty much regardless, unless Kamara, miraculously gets full practice by Friday.
Do you say 18 carries and 2 targets is not a good role?
It's not great.
For the salary, I think it's interesting.
It's fine, yeah. It's better than most guys in that range will get, but just I think I need more volume from him given how my expected levels of efficiency for him are at.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't think that I'm going to get there even without Miller. So hopefully Miller just plays, and
yeah, I agree.
Then maybe we get Chris Olave in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, I want Baker in the playoffs.
Well,
I want Baker. Rude. I guess they both could technically still make it, I think. Like, it's a weird path. I think the Packers have to lose, which is plausible. There's some other stuff that has to happen, but I just want to watch Baker. Josh Jacobs missed practice Wednesday, but head coach Antonio Pierce said Jacobs will push to play this week. Jacobs has practiced just once since his injury, and that was 2 weeks ago. Got a random Thursday practice. So I still doubt he plays, but he at least could. What's your interest level in Zamir White at $6,500 if Jacobs can't go?
Relatively high, but just one of the situations where I got to be a little bit cautious because he can get scripted out a bit. He's played 70%, 81, and 58% of the snaps the past 3 weeks without Jacobs, but the role last week, obviously the lower snap rate there, 73% in the first half, but 46% in the second half as Amir Abdullah got more work and they were trailing. I don't know what to expect from this game. Do you have like a firm read on what we're getting here from the Broncos?
I think that last week's role for White was better than I would have expected if you had told me what that game flow would look like. Because I know it was a 3-point game at the end, but it was a bit more slanted towards the Colts for most of it. So honestly, I thought it was encouraging. If you look at the 3 games altogether, White's at 19.7 carries and 3.7 targets per game, which is 27 carries plus 2x targets, 112 yards in scrimmage. That's a really good role. The Broncos defense has been better this year, but they've still been bad against the rush. So I think that White is actually a pretty good option at 65 if there is no Jacobs. I prefer Bijan at 69. Salary's closer. But I think that Zamir White is in that Aaron Jones, James Conner, Saquon Barkley, James Cook tier for like number 2 for me behind Bijan personally.
So Bijan is your number 1 overall?
I think so. It's frightening.
I think I got to go with my other NFC South darling this year, Rachaad White, is my RB1. But other than that, I mean,
I think if I liked value receivers more, I'd put Rachaad White 1.
That's my issue is I'm building lineups. Definitely not while we're talking. Definitely not while I was on here myself or anything. But which that's true. I wasn't doing that. I was just trying not to flounder too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely in that tier. I'm just saying there's a little more risk to it than I would like. But I don't know what to expect from the Broncos. They could go lay down. I don't know. They could also go get fired up. Who could say?
I think I think both teams will play decently hard, just given their situations. Broncos playing for jobs, Raiders playing for Antonio Pierce to get him that full-time job. So I expect the Raiders at least to play pretty hard still.
Yeah, and motivation it's personal, it's subjective, that kind of stuff. But I feel like I say this every year when I'm watching. Like Sierra doesn't really watch a lot of football till closer to the playoffs.
Yeah,
and I always I always feel like I'm pointing out how hard everyone is playing, even when they're eliminated. I'm like, this matters to
Yeah.
virtually everyone in the league. Like,
Yeah.
if they're on the field, they're probably playing hard. So
Yeah, for sure. Jaden Reed and Christian Watson were both able to get limited practices in on Wednesday for the Packers. Must win game for them. Watson has missed 3 games with a hamstring injury. Reed left early in week 17, but he said he's good to go. Packers are facing the Bears. Assuming both those guys play, will you target either now that their salaries are a bit higher than they were earlier on this year? Reed is 61, Watson 6, or Reed 71, Watson 65. I wish he were 61.
yeah, that would be phenomenal. I'll start with Reed. His role is really fun. He's also very good. I know he's not 100%, but really nobody's 100% at this point.
Sure.
So I'm okay to sort of factor that in. He gets carries, he gets creative looks, he can score multiple touchdowns because he's really, really good. The salary is reasonable. I don't quite know if I'd put him on the level of like an Olave or something, but he's not that far off because he gets, I don't want to put every receiver who gets like carries in the Debo Samuel
He's
bucket, but like
Curtis Samuel and I mean that in a complimentary way.
and so that's really appealing. As for Watson, look, like nobody cares about your fantasy teams or anything, but I drafted him sort of as a value, and obviously he's been hurt, but I was able to like drop him and not sweat it. He had like I think a 2 touchdown game right after that, but
Yeah.
he kind of is really touchdown dependent. He's clearly far from 100%. I don't really
Yeah.
feel like he's a good process play.
Yeah.
That being said, he's sort of in that Gabe Davis bucket where if you like the game, if you like, that it's going to be high scoring, you can consider him, but that's as far as the process kind of goes for me.
Yeah, and I think that I agree with everything you said about him. Where not the best process-based play, but like there's a path to a ceiling, which is encouraging. In the games he has played this year, Watson's overall target share is 17% or 18%, which is not great, but he has a 36% deep target share and a 28% red zone share. Reed's role has been down a lot in Watson's games. So I think he's played well enough to like nudge that up. So I would say I prefer Watson over Reed just because of concerns around some things, but thinking more about that, honestly, like the Packers have a long track record to their credit, I think I would say, of easing players in off of injury, kind of being cautious and smart with guys. And he's had a lot of hamstring stuff. So I don't know. Maybe I should be a bit lower on him, but I think it does spread out the Packers targets a bit to the point where I'd rather just go maybe just say Aaron Jones despite a tough matchup kind of thing.
W- yeah, I don't want to. Is that your phone?
Yeah, I was muting it.
I hear it vibrate. I was like, my phone's never on vibrate, but
Mine rarely is, but I'm all out of sorts today for some reason.
yeah, I'm gonna try to get us back on track. Rest of the show, no nonsense. Rest of the show.
Sure.
Uh,
I believe you, buddy.
Jaden Reed has a carry or target on 19.6% of his snaps this year, which is basically like a top 10 rate. It's above Devontae Adams. DeAndre Hopkins is right below Keenan Allen and CeeDee Lamb. That kind of helps adjust for the fact that he's not played full games a lot or like recently. So I think we're talking Bears next.
Yeah.
So we can kind of let's move on to the Bears and we'll kind of circle back and talk about this one.
So that's with Cole Kmet didn't practice Wednesday for the Bears. He has a knee injury. He did play week 17, but super limited, just 3 routes for Kmet in that game. The Bears are in play against a pretty leaky Packers defense, but now Kmet's banged up. They're really only maybe 3 or 4 guys in this team. It's Kmet, it's Justin Fields, DJ Moore, potentially Khalil Herbert, though I think his salary is a bit higher than I would have hoped for on FanDuel this week. But how are you viewing the Bears with Kmet banged up against a bad Packers defense?
Yeah, I love how these always come down to the divisional games because you want to talk motivation, like knocking a team out or just beating a team in week 18 that's your rival. That stuff matters. So I think the Bears, they're set for the draft. I think they can go out and play tough.
They're auditioning. Like Fields is auditioning for whether
Yeah.
it be the Bears or Team X, he's auditioning.
Yeah. I think Fields is in the conversation for QB2. I think I'm just going to have Dak there as
Yeah.
QB1 and have a hard time moving away from that, but he's in that conversation. He might be my QB2 by Sunday, but
Currently
I
is
don't
for
think I need
you.
to do it. He is for you.
Currently.
I can't fault that at all. The only thing that I he's just hard to stack because you have to get to DJ Moore, and it's probably worth it. The salary of 8,000 though is a little tricky.
It's not bad given his ceiling, I don't think.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
his single game target share since week 11, just it's an arbitrary cutoff, but it's when things went nuts. 41%, 41%, 32%, 23%, 26%, and 43%.
And the 26% was when he got hurt early in the game. Like he played through it, but he
Yeah.
got hurt. Overall in the full games with Fields, so like a larger sample, 29% target share for Moore. That includes week 1 where he didn't do a whole lot against the Packers defense, but like that's impressive when you include bad games, and he's still at 29%, 39% deep target share. So I think that a Justin Fields, DJ Moore, probably leaning Aaron Jones bring
Okay.
back. I think that's a viable game stack this week.
I would probably lean Reed.
Sure. If he gets into full practice by Friday and Watson's still limited, then that would tilt things a bit more towards Reed. Sure.
What about Jordan Love?
I think the Bears defense has played well enough where it's I'm a bit lower on him. It's hard to find someone I love for stacking there because part of Reed is he gets red zone rush attempts, which doesn't help Love. So I think he's a good quarterback. I just have a hard time with him for DFS because it's a lot harder for me to stack him than I think that he could maybe just go Jordan Love with Aaron Jones. I think that's not totally insane given the amount of passing game work Jones gets. But it's fair to ask.
Yeah, I like Love at 78, but Fields at 84. I feel like I'd probably want to try to get there if I'm stacking this game. This feels like a bookmaker game that we talked about. So,
yeah, it's definitely a game where I'm okay with game stacks. I'd rather stack this game than Cowboys Commanders as far as both sides. So yeah, I think that's totally fair. Speaking of bookmaker, let's dive in now and talk about 3 key games on this main slate. And the headliner is Sunday night, and that actually is on the FanDuel main slate. Typically, the Sunday night game is not in the main slate, but they've done this recently the past couple of years. They include the Sunday night hammer back in our lives once again. Bills versus Dolphins are right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. The Bills are 3-point favorites. Total is 49.5. Both teams have been a bit wonky recently, though. The Dolphins got smoked last week. Tua's shoulder is banged up. Josh Allen doesn't throw anymore. So how much of a priority is this game for you?
Fairly big, but not as big as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Also, I'm just going to get out in front of it. I'm not a Bills fan. I have a Dolphins hat right beside me as well.
We're
I don't know
both.
if it's on screen here, but
We're
I
both.
just want to. I'd like to shout it out. It was just a nice hat, but
yeah,
it's a big one.
Dolphins hat. We could go both. Cover both sides. I like this hat more.
Can you restart your computer again?
Fair. Go ahead.
I think we have the running back value to get to Josh Allen. 9,500 is really high, and he's coming off of. Well, he's extended his streak of games with rushing touchdowns. He's got 2. This is working backwards. 2-2, 1-1, and 2. He didn't score against the Jets, and then he had scored in 4 straight on the ground.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But weirdly, those aren't necessarily tied to massive games because as you mentioned, the passing's not really there. And while he's got a lot of rush attempts, he's not I see the 81 there, but he's not gonna get you 60, 80 yards rushing necessarily. He might in this game because it matters so much. He might just run a crazy amount, but
I think he will. Yeah.
You think he'll get 70 yards rushing?
Well, I'm not going to bet that minus 110 at FanDuel Sportsbook. But I think that what you see in playoff games is you see quarterbacks run a lot more.
Yeah.
And so like Allen's rushing prop this week is 36.5. Like, let's actually see what 70 is. Just curious. Plus 430 to get 70 yards. That's not, it's kind of interesting. Maybe I am gonna bet it. But like I think we do see quarterbacks run more in high leverage games. This is the highest leverage game you could possibly concoct, especially if the Steelers win on Saturday, which makes it a must-win game for the Bills. So I actually do think we're going to see them let their ostrich roam, and that is letting Josh Allen run the football.
Yeah. The question though is he, how much of a priority is he for you at that salary?
Not as much of a priority as Dak. Dak's salary is 87, and I like Dak's matchup more. I like the way they're letting Dak cook more. So I prefer Dak, but even considering his salary, Allen is in that like QB2 discussion. I almost made him a love instead of Justin Fields. So I think he's in that QB2 discussion for me.
I think that's very, very fair.
Also, like we get the Sunday Night Hammer back. Like, how can I not be nostalgic back to like 2012? Oh, no, 2015 FanDuel lineups.
Yeah, I'm not going to advocate anyone makes their decisions based on nostalgia.
Well,
or else I'd be playing Chris Conley at 4,200.
You looked at his salary?
That was when I mentioned him already when we were talking Jordan Mason.
Oh.
But you missed it because you haven't restarted your computer since Sunday Night Football was on the main slate.
Wow, that was a good callback. Good job. But yeah, I think that Allen's in the QB2 discussion for me. And I also think that part of the reason I like him is because I can stack him with Stephon Diggs, and Diggs' salary is down to 76.
You
now,
sure
Diggs,
can.
Yeah. Should I? Maybe. I don't know. So, like, look at this game log. It's abysmal. Just hideous stuff. He has not had more than he has not hit 75 yards since the coordinator change. With Joe Brady, his max is 74. He's gone over 50 once. However, target totals have been fine, and the target shares are awesome. Look at the target share since Dawson Knox came back. Diggs at 32% with a 43% deep target share. Like, I know they're 3-point favorites here, but like, will they be able to ground and pound the opponent to death in this game? I don't know. Probably not. So I think that it's a good spot to buy into Diggs. That is famous last words from the past month and second half of last year too. But I do like him a lot at 76. So I have a lot of interest here in getting to Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, even if it does force me to lean on the 6,000 range running backs.
Yeah, I'm gonna lean on the 6,000 range running backs a lot anyway, or at least like the low sevens too. And you look at this box score that Jim has pulled up, no touchdowns in 4 straight games, and you would think like, okay, well, eventually, things will change. He's overperformed from a touchdown standpoint, largely because he had a 3 touchdown game against Miami. But
batter versus pitcher data. Let's go.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I see the case. I think when I build Josh Allen lineups, Diggs will be in there, but I'm not looking at Stephon Diggs as a one-off play ever.
Yeah, I think the DK Metcalf at that same salary is a better one-off play in the Seahawks Cardinals game we'll discuss here in a second.
Yeah.
Mentioned, or I think you mentioned that Jalen Waddle has a chance to go this week. $7,000 for him. Tyreek Hill 95. I want to talk more about the running backs though. James Cook's salary is 74. If the Bills have been run heavy, it would make sense that it's been Cook who's benefited, and he has. Now, it hasn't translated to a lot of FanDuel points recently because it seems like teams are keying in on trying to stop him as a pass catcher. No targets against the Chargers, 3 against the Patriots for -4 yards. But overall, if we look at James Cook since the coordinator change, he's at 16.2 carries, 3.7 targets, and 113 yards in scrimmage per game. Red zone share is 25%. That actually is an improvement from 19% with Ken Dorsey. So I feel like Cook is more likely to be in my main lineup than Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, because I like Dak so much. How are you viewing James Cook here?
Like him. there's still a wide range of outcomes, and the highest of highs, while we're looking at the 35.1, it's more like the 22.6 range, I think is more realistic here. The other thing that kind of worries me about this game, which just then applies to James Cook, because I'm trying to get as nitpicky as I can, because we have it's a big slate. We're gonna have some value. Is Miami can play slow. They haven't been lighting it up necessarily. This game
Yeah.
could be, hey, let's not make a mistake that costs us the season or like costs us seeding. That's the sort of one of the things that has me lower on this situation. Now, with that being said, James Cook is one of my loves because I think I'm higher on this game than that. But it is a fear. I'm always looking for like the sort of bulletproof, can't knock it sort of process plays. I still see some holes with Cook, but you can't really argue the volume. And if memory serves, Miami is pretty bad against running backs out of the backfield. Yeah,
Okay.
I have him 29th in player level adjusted FanDuel points per target. So again, I'm high on Cook. Don't think he's like a slam dunk play. Would like to bring it back somehow. But I think before we move off the Bills, any thoughts on any other Bills, including your boy or Dalton Kincaid?
Yeah. My boy is Gabe Davis. I feel like it's been not super difficult to predict him this year, like when he's going to bust, which is most of the time. But like the Eagles and Chargers games is like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I just don't feel as though this is a spot where I expect him to go nuts. Now, it's a good game to stack, which is typically the setup you want for Gabe Davis. But the Dolphins, they've had a lot of injuries to their defense, a lot of key injuries, but it's primarily to pass catcher. I know Xavier Howard is banged up, didn't practice Wednesday with a foot injury. If he can't go, that would probably bump up Davis a bit because Jalen Ramsey hasn't shadowed much this year, but he has at times. I think if you're going to use Jalen Ramsey to shadow, you would probably do it with Stephon Diggs. And that would leave Gabe Davis against a pretty banged up defense overall. So I'm not overly high on him, honestly. I don't think he's in play as a one-off at $6,400. I much prefer Drake London if I'm in that range for a one-off. So no one-offs for me. He's been in that range or been in that discussion at times this year, just not this week. But I will have a non-zero number of Davis lineups exclusively tied to game stacks of this game. But I'm lower on him than I am a lot of times, is what I would say.
I needed to check in because
Yeah.
even though I'm wearing the Bills hat,
Yeah.
you have the read on Gabe Davis.
Kincaid is 57. I think it's a pretty good salary for him. He actually got some deep work this past week, more so than he's gotten previously. 7 targets, 87 yards. I mentioned before the splits for them since Dawson Knox came back. And in that time, Kincaid is at a 19% target share, 14% deep, and 33% inside the red zone. That's not bad at all, honestly. So I think 57, he's probably my favorite tight end below 6,000, below Jake Ferguson. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think he's a player love for me.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
I wrote those a bit ago, but just to get away from, yeah, to get like away from the high salaried guys who you can really justify a little bit more easily, specifically Trey McBride. 19.4% target share since Dawson Knox came back, 33% of the red zone targets, high target per route rate to help adjust, and Miami's not great against tight ends. So
Mm-hmm.
Kincaid helps offset Josh Allen's salary while also getting you a lot of touchdown equity because of his red zone role.
Yeah,
Josh Allen could still run for 2 touchdowns, but if he throws one, it goes to Kincaid. Wouldn't surprise me because of the red zone role that he has.
I'd agree with that. Okay. Let's talk about the Dolphins side of things. I think you know the Tyreek Hill is in play at 95. Like, I don't need
Yeah.
to sell you on that. My question for you is one lineup, you go in Tyreek Hill or CeeDee Lamb?
Lamb.
I agree. Let's talk about Hill's a good play, but like prefer Lamb as far as priorities
Yeah.
go. I think that Mostert will play. If he does play, I think both the backs are pretty tough to tough to stomach for me personally. But if Mostert does not go, Devon Achan's salary is $8,200. In the games where Achan's snap rate has been at least 40%, he's at 122.9 yards from scrimmage per game with a 32% red zone share. So there's no Mostert. I'd feel really good about Achane. I'd prefer him over Rashad White in that scenario at $7,700 as like the spend up kind of running back. He's a tough bring back for a Josh Allen lineup. I'd probably have to go Kincaid over Josh Allen in that scenario. But where are you at an Achane if we think that Mostert sits? Again, I don't think he will, but just hypothetically.
I would prefer him to Rashad White. Would start to put it started to make it tough to build out a lineup because I like Geno Smith. Other than that, I don't anticipate spending down a lot at quarterback.
Yeah.
And whenever that's the case, it makes it hard. Even at $8,200 salary, if you're plugging in Dak Prescott and you want to get to CeeDee Lamb, things dry up really quickly. And I'm not, we're not about playing tons of values and eliminated teams. So
right.
I do prefer him, but I think that's kind of just where I am.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that as well. Any final thoughts for you on this game?
Tua has been really matchup dependent this year. This is not a great matchup, so the FOMO is lower, which plays into why I'm lower on Tyreek Hill.
I agree with that as well. Let's take a look now at the second bookmaker game, which is the Seattle Seahawks on the road taking on the Arizona Cardinals, a must-win game for the Seahawks. And they're 2.5-point favorites here. Total is 47.5. That spread, though, has been tightening. It was 3 earlier on this week, now 2.5. The Seahawks side here is in a great matchup. The Cardinals, as well as their offense has played, their defense has still been doggy-doo. So we love the Seahawks. I can say that. How are you viewing the Cardinals as a bring-back option here?
Yeah, so Seattle's, what are they in adjusted rush defense? I think 30. Are they 32nd, right?
They might be dead last.
I think they're dead last. I have too many things open, but I think they're dead last.
Arizona's 28th. Great game. Love this game.
Yeah. Okay. So they're last. Defenses. But the thing is, Seattle's really struggled keeping the ball. Like their time of possession the past 6 games has been 24 minutes, 23, 31, 27, 26, 22. If you watch that Steelers game, it felt like they weren't, like the Seahawks weren't ever really on the field. Pittsburgh just wore the clock down. It's because Seattle can't stop the run. And, this is a team where you probably want to stop the run a bit because Arizona is 27th in pass rate over expectation since Kyler came back. You mentioned James Conner in passing, I think, already. He doesn't fit like the overall perfect lineup trend, but that's not to, James Conner is good enough at football in this matchup to have a good game, keep Seattle off the field. And again, if this is what Arizona's playing for, is hurting Seattle's chances, I think the motivation is going to be there. So I'm a little bit worried about Seattle, not to the point that I won't play them, but that's kind of my read on this game.
Yeah, I love James Conner. I think he's an awesome option this week. And the game since Kyler came back, which is also since Conner came back, 16.1 carries, 2.7 targets per game for 86.7 yards. Those numbers aren't phenomenal, but when you put him in a good matchup with a 46% red zone share overall, that's pretty sick. $7,300. I think he's like kind of on par with James Cook in that range, honestly, which is a big compliment to him because I do like Cook quite a bit. But Conner, I think, is a really good option. They've been eliminated since like the preseason. So like they've been playing this whole way the entire year. And I think that's enough to really like Conner at 73, given the matchup. So Conner, I'm on board with. You mentioned some question marks around Seattle. I understand what you're saying, and that's fair. The situations in which I feel best about Seattle pass catchers are when they're going to get pushed, and I think they might get pushed a decent amount here, given how bad their defense is. And again, it's a must-win game. So since their bye week in the games that DK Metcalf has played, DK has a 24% target share with 38% deep and 45% inside the red zone. That high leverage work is awesome, and it's allowed him to get to 90-plus yards 4 separate times in that span. $7,600. He's playing indoors. Terrible opposing pass defense. I think that DK is like one of my favorite plays in the entire slate, regardless of position, regardless of salary. It sounds like you're lower on him than I am, though.
See, it sounds like that, but he's a player love for me.
Okay.
I just see the paths to, oh gosh, Arizona's just bleeding the clock. DK's got 40% of 20 pass attempts because they just can't be on the field.
5 targets is enough for 125 yards, baby. Let's go.
I love DK this week. I've been talking about potential regression for him for a while. The volume, though, like when I saw how good his target shares have been, but how low the volume's been, I looked into it and I was like, I realized the pace, the time of possession has just been so low. It's possible again this week based on what Arizona can do or chooses to do and be really run heavy. So that's my only downside. Also, sort of, I like the market shares enough. They're not necessarily as great because Jackson Smith and Jigba's been more involved. Tyler Lockett's involved, but they all kind of cannibalize one another to the point that I don't, it doesn't help me. Like 3 receivers is too many for DFS for me. I prefer Metcalf. Do you have any interest in JSN though?
Mild, just because there's nothing down there. So it's really a
Right.
salary based thing. It's not an I like his archetype or his like profile thing, which is not what I want to do.
Yeah, this is the exact kind of thing I've been trying to avoid all season.
Which is correct. That's what you should be doing.
In the past, I'd be like, oh, he's the best play down here. I got it. Like, I don't love the upside with what he offers necessarily. But I might have to get there because if I'm messing around with like Dak and CD stacks with all of the value running backs, and you need to be in the JSN range to stack Dak and CD Lamb, which I don't think is going to be very feasible.
Right. So I think that he's a consideration, despite the fact I'd rather not.
Yeah.
Lockett is 68. Much prefer Godwin in that range. Prefer DeAndre Hopkins too, despite the fact Hopkins only playing for incentives. But I think Mike Vrabel will get those guys up to play that game. So I think Lockett's like fine, but I don't know. Whoa, he hasn't scored since November 12th. Maybe some regression is due, but like I think I've just seen too many Seattle games, and it's like so frustrating whenever he hits like this dude hits a turf more than any other player I've seen in my entire life, other than myself when I was like a dumb offensive lineman. So like he reminds me of myself. We'll go with that. We're both balding. We both hit the turf too often. I see too much of myself in Tyler Lockett to justify using him in DFS. Did want to talk about the Cardinals though? And I think the other bring back besides James Conner is Trey McBride, 67. Salary is high for sure. And that's a concern. He hasn't had a huge game recently, but target shares are still good. Raw targets are still good, despite the pass rate over expectation you mentioned. So I do like him quite a bit, 67. It might not be super easy to get there, but a Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, Trey McBride game stack is pretty palatable here. So where are you on Trey McBride and any other bringbacks in the Cardinals?
Like him a lot. Hardest part is the salary. Again, it gets tough this week. There's probably going to be some names. I mean, there's going to be some names that flash by Sunday. As of right now, though, a little bit tricky in that regard. So I don't know if I have the salary to get to McBride at 67, but aside from Tyler Conklin, who I guess hasn't scored all year, McBride remains the second biggest tight end touchdown regression candidate. He should have 3 more than he does. That's appealing. Yeah, because he only got the 2.
Yeah.
So in game stacks, like if I'm playing Geno DK, like I have the salary to get to McBride. I think that's appealing.
Yeah.
But I don't think I can get there as one-off necessarily.
I can, but I won't get to any of the other pass catchers on the Cardinals. I'm fine avoiding that personally. Okay, let's talk about our final bookmaker game of the week. That is the Cowboys against the Commanders. Again, the Cowboys win the NFC East if they win this game. So big motivation spot there. They are 13.5 point favorites against the Commanders. Total is up to 46.5. So the implied total is 30 for Dallas in this game. How high are you in the Cowboys in this spot, and any interest in a bring back on the Commanders side? This has been the question every week this year.
Very high on the Cowboys, but it's difficult. So Dak's my QB1, CeeDee Lamb in a vacuum would be my wide receiver 1. But if you stack Dak and CeeDee Lamb with James Conner, Zamir White, and Bijan Robinson, and then you just plug in the Panthers defense, which is the lowest salary defense aside from the Washington defense.
I'm not going Panthers. I'm not.
It was an example.
My guy Baker. I don't care. I'm not doing it.
It was an example. What's the remaining salary?
57-67 left with
2
tight end and 2 receivers. Yeah.
You really gotta love Jackson Smith and Jigba or try to force a bring back in this game. I mean,
unless we get Christian Kirk.
unless we get Christian Kirk. But like realistically, there's not a whole lot less you can do unless you go from like James Conner to Aaron Jones or something.
Sure.
Or you can even plug in Jamal Williams, but it's not enough to get you like
that.
I'm giving examples.
I'm not even making a fake lineup with that.
But like that's how hard it is to stack Dak and CD this week.
Unless we get Christian Kirk.
Sure.
Which we might.
Would you ever perceive yourself playing CD Lamb without Dak?
That's tough at the salary.
I think so too. And as much as I love CD Lamb, he did have a 92-yard touchdown catch that really boost. I mean, he had a 17-target game. I'm not taking anything away from that part of it, but like he got pushed to the max because in part he had basically 100 yards and a touchdown on what should have been a safety.
He also should have had a second touchdown though if he had held on the ball. So
true, yeah,
could have been bigger. Yeah, I think he's tough to get to in non-Dak lineups. But also, if you go with a non-Dak quarterback, it does offset his salary a bit. So is that.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, sure.
So like if you go like Geno, Metcalf, I don't know. Like, there's not.
I mean, you could go to like Geno JSN.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're pretty much gonna have to play JSN if you want to play CD Lamb this week, unless we get Christian Kirk. But even if we get Christian Kirk, you still might need to play him.
No, you can get back to like 85 if you use Christian Kirk. But yeah, I think that it's tough to get there for sure. And like that's the issue is that I also don't want to use Tony Pollard. Yeah. I've expended all my patience on this guy. $7,600. His salary went up. Despite the fact he has not hit 20 points since week 1, and that was 21.2. Like, what's the ceiling? What are the odds? Like the Commanders' pass defense has been the highlight, but they've also been bad against the rush since the Montez Sweat and Chase Young trade. So like it's a good matchup, but like Rico Dowdle practiced on Wednesday, so probably back this week. That's a potential red zone threat. Like if I lose money because I don't use Tony Pollard, then fine, I lose money. That's my perspective right now.
Yeah, give me Jake Ferguson instead. I think that's going to be. So I'm basically what I was getting at with let's look at what we can get with CeeDee Lamb and Dak. It's going to be Dak and Jake Ferguson a lot. He's just had a really good role. The salary is very reasonable. Bottom 2 pass defense matchup. Washington has like good splits against tight ends. If you look at just sort of raw numbers, they're actually like first in yards per route run allowed to the position, but haven't really played much. And if you adjust to the opponent level, they're like 20th.
Yeah.
On a per target basis. So I'm not sweating that at all. Give me Ferguson so I can play Dak, and I'll go from there.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with Ferguson. He's a love for me, and he was the easiest love. What?
I know what your next question is, and no.
Okay, good. So no Commanders bringbacks. I agree. Could not possibly agree more with you on that. So let's now go into our trends discussion for the rest of this weekend. I already had one, so I'll have only 3 total trends here. 2 from Brandon, 1 from me. You're going to talk about the Eagles because they still have a lot of motivation right now. Nick Sirianni has hinted they may rest starters, but like the NFL is weird. The Commanders have, by my model, a 13.5% chance to win. And if they win, the Eagles could still be the 2 seed. Now, the 5 seed would allow them to face the NFC South winner instead of, other stuff, instead of the Rams or the Packers, which is probably a better thing. But like, I think you'd want home field. So I think they have motivation until the Cowboys get a big lead, which it's not guaranteed they do. So I think it's worth discussing the Eagles here. Devontae Smith is banged up, but let's look into the Eagles here. What have you seen with them recently on offense?
Yeah, so Devontae Smith being out would hurt the offensive efficiency, but open up passing volume for 2 really good players in Dallas Goedert and AJ Brown. So I think that's appealing. We also have as you laid out, the situation, the possibility where they pull their players, but there's no guarantee that Dallas, they could win and not have it be a blowout.
Correct.
And Philly plays this whole game. Like, this is a team worth discussing, even if our ultimate conclusion is I don't think it makes sense. But Dallas Goedert came back 4 games ago. He's had a pretty big impact, and his opener wasn't super involved, 15% target share, but since then, single game target shares of 30%, 25%, and 26%. So really consistently involved for a 4-game target share of 24%. The ADOT, or average depth of target, only 5.3 yards downfield. Don't love that, but he's still getting downfield work. So that sort of just suggests that he's getting a mix of some downfield work and really safe targets. 1.8 downfield targets per game in this split, 33% red zone share, and 40% of the end zone targets. He's been targeted on 25.7% of his routes in this split. Travis Kelce, who I know hasn't had a huge Travis Kelce year, he's at 26% even. This is a really good role for Goddard since he's come back. But even with him taking up a lot of targets, A.J. Brown's seeing a ton of work. He's got a 33.6% target share for 71 yards per game, 113 air yards per game, and no touchdowns in this split. It's a 44% air yard share in this sample with 3.8 downfield targets. Red zone role has not really been there, but A.J. Brown can definitely earn any kind of target he wants. Now, Devontae Smith up in the air for this weekend, was in crutches as a walking boot. He's got a 21.6% target share, but that's a pretty sizable share to sort of vacate. I'm just going to say Julio Jones, I know, scored twice. He had a 40% route rate, but just 2 targets on 17 routes. I'm not chasing that at 51, even though I desperately need
How is Julio scoring
value.
touchdowns now when he couldn't when he was like a legit player?
It's regression. Just
Sure.
took 15 years. But I think AJ Brown's fascinating, and Jalen Hurts in these games, very good passing success rate of 52%, plus efficiency when you adjust for opponents faced. 43 rushing yards in these games with a 38% red zone rush share. So this game matters for the Eagles. They can get the 2 seed, but they could also be scoreboard watching. We want to talk about mistake erasers. We want to talk about teams with motivation. Like the Giants just played the Eagles tough on Christmas. They could get pushed again. The Eagles also have not had a hot end to the season. They might not want to phone it in. That might not be the best for morale. What are you thinking for the Eagles here? Are they sneakily going to get overlooked because they could be scoreboard watching?
Yeah. So I think you just kind of like make assumption lines where you assume the Cowboys Commanders game stays close. And if you assume that, that means you should be high on Hurts, high on AJ Brown, high on Dallas Goedert. Especially because like we saw earlier this year, when you took Dallas Goedert out of the mix, Devontae Smith had an awesome stretch. If you take one of these guys who gets like legit target shares and narrow that target tree down, that's awesome for everyone else. AJ Brown wasn't great in that time, but like I think that Goddard would be. So I think that Goddard is like a focal point if Devontae Smith can't go. Like in DFS, you have to be okay with risk. And like there is a risk they pull starters if the Cowboys get up big. That is a risk. And that could happen. That's very much in the range of outcomes. But like I think that's an okay risk to take in this spot. And I think because there is upside, should they stay close and should they push for all 4 quarters, given the matchup, given how concentrated the usage is here, given how good those players are. So I do like them quite a bit. I would not be opposed to a Saquon Barkley bring back in those lineups too. The rush defense has been quietly bad recently. Maybe not quietly, like James Conner torched them last week. So I think that a Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, like full game stack is pretty appealing for me this week personally.
Yeah, and I know like there's the chance that they scoreboard watch, that they've already mentioned that they might do that, but this team's been they've been just losing games.
Yeah.
I think if it's close, like they still, I don't know.
I'm
You're not getting a
hoping
lot of
that
salary
I'm hoping
discount,
that
but
Sirianni saying this scares people away from targeting them. That's what I would say.
yeah, Hurts normally would be like my QB1 at the salary. I don't know how many brotherly shoves they'll force if in a game that might not matter as much as it could. I think Goddard's still very appealing on a tight end slate that's
Yeah.
appealing but not like phenomenal.
Yeah.
So
I would also say sports books are treating the Eagles as if they'll push the entire game. Because if I don't alter motivation for them, I have them favored by 5.8 and the actual spread is 5.5. So that implies they think they push the entire game to me. So I think that's encouraging as well. Okay, let's talk about my one trend here, and that's the Panthers defense, because the Bucs are in a must-win game. They're on the road facing the Panthers, whose defense has had ups and downs during the year. So I wanted to dig in to see the best route to attacking them, and if we should attack them with the Bucs skill guys. So the full season, the Panthers are 30th overall against defensively, based on numberFire's metrics, 23rd against the pass, 29th against the rush. That signals we can go at everybody here. The Panthers did have a stretch in the middle part of the year where they were missing some pretty key guys, but they have still underperformed expectations on early downs against both the pass and the rush in 5 of their past 6 games once they started to get a little bit healthier. They've been fine on late downs, and the Bucs are a bit too dependent on late down magic to be a good offense, but overall, the defense of the Panthers has not been great. So I do think that we should get full clearance to target the Bucs here, assuming Baker Mayfield is fully healthy, good to go for this game. And since the bye week, Mike Evans has a 24% target share, 46% deep target share, and 30% inside the red zone. In their first game against the Panthers, Evans had 162 yards and a touchdown. J.C. Horn, their cornerback, was back for that game, but missed week 17. He was limited on Wednesday. I think he'll play, but not fully healthy right now. Chris Godwin that time, 24% target share, 24% deep, 21% inside the red zone. He has 75 plus yards in 3 consecutive games. Panthers did blank him on 3 targets last time they played, but I'm on Godwin here at 69 despite that. Rachaad White's salary is 77, which is not low. He did lose some work to Chase Edmonds last week, but that was mostly when they were down 2 scores late. He did have a fumble, White did, but he got a carry on the first drive after that, so it was more a game script than a benching there. I like White. I'd like to get there. I might need to spend down for others, for other running backs, but White is well worth the salary. It would be a roster construction thing more than anything else. So I think it's fully arrows up on the Bucs in a must-win game if Baker's good to go. How do you feel about them here?
As usual, I like them. I think Chris Godwin's going to end up being sort of a core level play for me at the sub 7,000 salary. Still due for 2.9 more touchdowns based on their performance, which for a lot of the season hasn't even been great. Just has underperformed even from that. And I really need the savings. I love Mike Evans plenty, but he keeps he just overperforms or underperforms so drastically with his touchdowns. He's like, obviously the 1,000-yard streak, but he'll have like 1,300 yards and 2 touchdowns or 15, and it's wild. But Godwin, I think, is going to be kind of a key for me this week by Sunday. I mean, he's already kind of in that conversation. He's probably the best receiver play in the 6,000 range again in a game that matters. I know you can still somewhat question the yardage upside and how tangible the yardage upside is. But there's also something to be said for somewhat safer targets. And despite the fact that his ADOT is not nearly as high, it's like 5 yards shorter than Mike Evans's. Evans is overperforming from a catch rate over expectation standpoint. He's a plus 0.7% according to Next Gen Stats. Godwin since the bye, minus 4.6%. So again, a lot just points to better, and better things for Godwin. So he's my favorite play here, even though Rachaad White is a love for me. For White, it comes down to salary. Yeah. It's hard to get there. We just talked about, like, if you want to try to play CeeDee Lamb, you can't even consider someone like Rachaad White. It just doesn't really work out unless we get Christian Kirk, who we'll talk about more in a second here. But it's difficult. So I love White. I'm not worried about the role. They're not going to move. I would be astonished if they move away from him in week 18 after they've given him, frankly, what I would maybe argue the best non-Christian McCaffrey role in all of football at running back.
A hair above him.
Kyren, yeah, that's true.
But he's probably third.
He's probably third. He just consistently on the field gets receiving work. So
yeah,
I would rank my preferences: Godwin, Evans, White, I guess.
Probably. Yeah. Maybe I'd flip White and Evans, but it's close. And I think all 3 are very fine considerations.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your second trend. You mentioned Christian Kirk. Kirk, activated from IR in the sense that his practice window is open. He's not activated yet. Limited in practice on Wednesday. So there's a shot he goes. His salary is $4,000. If you look at their target shares with Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, Calvin Ridley has a 24% target share with 39% of the deep targets and a 42% red zone share. So the one counterpoint to loving Chris Godwin could be that Calvin Ridley is right there too, and Trevor Lawrence might be back. So I think that's worth considering, but you're taking a look at the Jags more in depth. What did you see when you dug into their data?
I kind of thought you were pushing us along and just doing a quick trend.
I figured I'd throw it in case you didn't have that data pulled already. I had it, so I figured I'd just toss it out there.
Well, I mean, I appreciate it. If you want to, do you just want to take this one?
Sure. Jags bad, Lawrence broken.
Yeah,
he'll be back next year. He'll rise like a phoenix from the ashes. But for this year, the guy is taking too many hits. I feel so bad for him.
That's ultimately why I think this is relevant. No matter what we get with Kirk, is Ridley's really fascinating. But yeah, this spread's 4.5. It was 5.5 at least at one point. Total's only 39.5. So you don't love that, but this team should have Trevor Lawrence, Zay Jones back. Christian Kirk back to practice, limited. Don't know what we're getting, but there is a 2-game sample of weeks 14 and 15. 3 if you count 13, where Kirk left after that first downfield target. You're grimacing. I don't know if you're reading or
so I think people are assuming that Kirk will be back, and they're like looking at like these practice highlights. He didn't look like super spry in those practice videos. I didn't think so. I think there's a shot he doesn't play still. So I think the data you have here is still pertinent.
Okay. Well, your concentrated face is also your hey.
That's why I shouldn't concentrate. That's
which is also looks like a hey man, you're talking about a game that's not even on the slate face. So
that's probably fair.
It's the same. So I never know.
I've been told my face is hard to interpret, so that's fair.
But yeah, so we have a third game if we open it up in that matchup where Kirk left after one snap. But Lawrence left in the fourth quarter, and that game went into overtime. So just keep that in mind. But what matters ultimately, I think, is that Calvin Ridley's the man. 11 targets per game in this 3-game split for 161 air yards, but 39.3 yards on a catch rate over expectation of minus 11%, despite 7 downfield targets per game, which for me is 10 plus yards downfield. He's caught 5 of 21 for 73 yards in this split. He's better than that. Zay Jones, though, I guess Zay Jones should stand out to me more at a salary of 5,600. He's got 6 downfield targets per game in this split, but also has left a lot of production on the field. 5 catches on those for 104 yards. Again, kind of feels like playing him because of the salary rather than because I want to play him. Evan Ingram, I think the salary is a bit high at 68. He's got 9 targets per game in this split, sub 5-yard ADOT. But 1.7 downfield targets per game, 17.6% red zone share. Titans led up a lot to receivers, 30th in catch rate over expectation, 28th in yards per route run. They're better against tight ends, but still let up some downfield looks to tight ends. So I'm not off of Ingram because of performance. I think of the salary is just hard, and I don't necessarily love this game to the point that I'm going to stack it a ton. Lawrence, though, has been somewhat lively against bad pass defenses, and Tennessee's sort of a funnel defense where it's better to throw. Almost 275 yards per game against teams 23rd or worse in 5 matchups. Good efficiency, but I still don't want to buy in to Trevor Lawrence too much. I'm good on Travis Etienne. I think coming off of a huge game, the matchup's not there.
Why is he 88? Tell me why. Give me one reason.
Well, I'm assuming people just play him more than expected, but multi-touchdown game last week, 118 scrimmage yards. But
wave.
Like, what do we do with the Jaguars here? This is your team. It's our team, but you're
my team last year.
I love Calvin Ridley this week.
I took the 5.5 with the Titans, if that tells you where I'm at.
Like Zay Jones?
No. He's
Like
trash. Like
not even when we desperately need or could really benefit from a $5,000 receiver.
I think the issue is that Trevor Lawrence missed last week's game, which was effectively a must-win game. And that's a bad signal because it's his right shoulder. He has been obliterated this entire year. So even if he can go on Sunday, he's not 100% healthy. And like that stinks because I love Trevor Lawrence and I want him to be healthy, but like he's just so banged up right now that it's hard for me to love a guy with bad talent. Calvin Ridley doesn't have a bad talent, which is why I could consider him at 69. But I think even though Baker's banged up, he's healthier probably now than Lawrence is. So that's why I lean towards Godwin between the two, despite the fact that Ridley gets the kind of work that I like. He gets downfield work. I love that. It's against a terrible secondary. So like if you guaranteed me Lawrence were like really healthy, like legit healthy, I would adore Calvin Ridley. But I think given his situation right now, it pushes me down. I still will use Calvin Ridley, especially if we get a full practice from Lawrence on Friday. But like the injuries have just mounted up to a point where it's like it bums me out, man.
Can you rank 5 receivers for me?
Sure.
Jaden Reed at 71, assuming he's full by Friday. Chris Godwin at 69. Calvin Ridley at 69. DeAndre Hopkins at 68 and Tyler Lockett at 68.
Okay. Godwin is 1.
Okay.
You said full by Friday for Reed?
Yeah.
I'll go Reed 2 then.
Okay.
Between Ridley and Hopkins for 3.
Yep.
And
then Lockett's 5.
Yeah.
Okay. That's where
I have a hard time between Hopkins and Ridley. Where do you stand on that one specifically?
I have Hopkins as a love for me tentatively. I might move that to Ridley.
Okay.
I do envision though Ridley and Hopkins mini stacks.
Sure. If especially if you get a Lawrence full practice Friday, like I think Arrow's up on that mini stack.
You're gonna need, well, at least the way that I'm building lineups, I'm gonna need multiple names in this range. And if I'm making some concessions with, quarterback play for both of these guys who are uber phenomenal talents,
Yeah.
if I stack them together in this game's back and forth, I could do better or I could do worse than just sort of uncorrelated plays too.
And it is 2 bad defenses. It's 2 offenses / teams I expect to push. I know the Titans are out, but Mike Vrabel's a weirdo. So like I think they're gonna go hard. And Hopkins is like the one guy who has like contract incentive things that actually are like legitimate. Like he needs like 64 yards to get there. And if Levis plays, he can get there in one play because like that's just Levis is a weirdo too. So I think that's a fine mini stack. And I'm very much okay with that. Weather for this weekend, we could have a snow game in Foxborough for the Patriots and Jets. 14-mile-per-hour winds, chance of heavy snow. My model has this total at 26.7 right now, which is the lowest it's ever been by almost 7 points. 5 points. The total's 30.5, and I took the under. Like that's where we're at on this game. I'm not using anybody here. No Zeke, no Breece Hall. I know Breece Hall might be interesting this week, but not to me. 11-mile-per-hour winds for Browns Bengals. That's fine. Nothing too concerning there. And then 10 for Packers and Bears. Let's dive in now to our positional plays for week number 18. Brandon, considering motivation, considering salaries, considering everything, who are you turning to on FanDuel for this week?
Dak Prescott. Do you have FanDuel Sportsbook pulled up still?
I can.
Can you go to the weekly specials and I'll talk about Dak and maybe look up the highest scoring team for Sunday only?
Sure.
And I'll talk about Dak. So Prescott's facing the Commanders with big seeding implications. A win, obviously, just massive for the division. The 2 seed of Washington's 31st in adjusted pass defense based on numberFire's metrics. Dak has 4 games against bottom 4 pass defenses, 299.3 yards per game, 2 touchdowns per game, 9.4 yard ADOT, an 8.6 yards per attempt, and 0.14 passing net expected points per dropback over expectation. That would be 0 if he played to the level of the defense. And I think Jim is seeing what I'm seeing with the highest scoring odds for teams on FanDuel Sportsbook for Sunday only. Dallas is plus 430 and nobody else is shorter than plus 1,000. So not going to overthink this one. And Dak is going to be in my head-to-head lineup against you unless something really drastic changes. Second love, Geno Smith, because look who's third on this list. It's the Seahawks. His salary's 7,300. And it's not that I'm only going to consider guys with like obvious playoff implications, but it helps. And he is now facing the 32nd ranked adjusted pass defense indoors. He's got multiple receivers to throw to. I might have a hard time loving, I love Metcalf. He's a love for me, but I might be lower on Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett than I want to be. But this is all good news for Geno Smith if you're trying to build CeeDee Lamb into your lineups or really build around like Rachaad White or Devon Achane and build different lineups. Someone like Geno Smith definitely helps because we got some upside quarterbacks on this slate, but there aren't like 3 or 4 guys who you think might go for 40. Like Josh Allen, he probably going to go for 28, but
on 3 pass attempts.
Yeah. But there's not a ton of 35-point risks here. That definitely opens things up. And in 5 games against bottom 8 pass defenses, Geno's averaging 293 yards, 1.6 touchdowns, 7.8 yards per attempt, 0.15 passing net expected points per drop back over expectation. It's there. And if you look at that first game, if that scares you off or anything, completion percentage over expectation was plus 11.5%, 9.1 yards per attempt, no DK Metcalf in that game. He did have a red zone pick. There was a fumble lost. Could have been a big game. So don't let that one scare you off, or at least I'm not going to.
Geno in games indoors, 328 yards passing, 233 in a game that I believe Metcalf left early. And then, no, he didn't. That's a lie. 233 was something else. And then he had 334, 3 touchdowns against the Cowboys. So Geno indoors is pretty fun.
There's a 217 in there somewhere. I can't remember what that means, but
what?
Did
I miss one? Did I miss one?
Well, you said there's 233 something, and you couldn't remember exactly what it was.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't remember what DK situation was. My first love is also Dak Prescott. I think he's awesome this week. I do tend to worry about the Cowboys outdoors, but does it matter against this defense for the Commanders? I'm not totally convinced it does. They've been getting shredded against the pass this year, but Dak is also running in key situations. He has 7 rush attempts inside the 10-yard line this year, and all of those have come since their bye week. He had 32.2 FanDuel points the first time they faced the Commanders, and for $8,700, he's a guy who can burn you for not using him, so love Dak this week. My second love will be Justin Fields. He was not great as a passer against the Packers earlier this year, and he hasn't been great against Joe Barry defenses in general, but did have 9 rushes for 59 yards there. He has had 7+ rush attempts every game since his return from his thumb injury. And clearly, Fields is auditioning for a job, whether it be in Chicago or elsewhere. He has an obvious stacking partner in DJ Moore. I can bring it back with Jaden Reed, Aaron Jones, etc. So I think Fields is a very good play this week. I don't think it's a good matchup for him with stylistically, which is kind of annoying. But overall, I do think that Fields very in play for this week. Let's go to running back. What you looking at there?
I still have Rachaad White, because while we talked about salaries being a little tricky, you can play Dak Prescott with Jake Ferguson and play Rachaad White very easily. It's just getting to CD is really difficult. But Bucs are in a win-and-in situation over the Panthers, gets them the NFC South. Carolina, bottom 4 rush defense according to numberFire's metrics, 32nd in adjusted rushing FanDuel points per carry according to my metrics. Pretty solid against backs out of the backfield, but White's coming off of pretty much his worst game of the year from just a usage standpoint, but still played 72% of the snaps, fumbled in the third quarter. They went to Chase Edmonds a little bit late in a multi-score game. Again, I just cannot envision that this team gave Rachaad White all of this work and then he's just going to get factored out or something. So in this matchup, must-win game, very, very into Rachaad White, whose salary is very reasonable still. Second love, James Cook. I've mentioned some fears about that game, maybe being a little bit closer to the vest, maybe not a true back and forth high scoring game, but even with that, James Cook doesn't necessarily need it. 36 carries over the past 2 games for 118 yards, 3 targets for -4 yards, as you mentioned. 64% first half snap rate looks better than the 54% rate overall last week. Has a downfield target in this split as well. It's a huge game, and at the end of the day, I can look back. Well, I guess really at the end of the day, because it's the night game, I can look back and say, look, James got a featured back in a game that meant everything to this team. I can live with that. And there's more to it, of course, but I'm all right with that. And my third love, it's going to be Bijan Robinson, which is, I've had a lot of issues with this guy. I think everyone has. Every fantasy manager who drafted him has, but his snap rates over the past 5 games have been 75%, 77, 59, 75, and 76. So to clarify, 75% of the snaps or better in 4 of the past 5 games. 24 adjusted opportunities per game, which is carries plus double your targets. 78 scrimmage yards per game, but 5.8 targets, 35.5% red zone opportunity share. Not the best overall offensive environment, but they can't hide Bijan in this game.
I don't think they can either, which is why I'll talk about him later on. But let's start things off with James Cook, my first love. He's at 113 yards in scrimmage in games with Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator, 16.2 carries and 3.7 targets. He has been down the past 2 weeks, but the snaps have been up in those games. So that's, I think, encouraging still. And his red zone role is a bit better. He's at 25% with Brady, 19% with Ken Dorsey. So still losing work to Josh Allen, their goal line back, but he's still getting a bit more work there. So do like James Cook quite a bit for $7,400. My second love is the one where I deviate from you. That's James Conner. Did want to get him at least mentioned in here. The Cardinals have been eliminated forever from the postseason, but they're still playing hard. Connor's at 16.1 carries and 2.7 targets per game with Kyler Murray, with 86.7 yards from scrimmage. The Seahawks just got shredded by the Steelers, and the Cardinals' running game is a lot better than that. So I think that James Conner does a lot for you for $7,300 in order to be worthy of a love for this week. My third love at running back is going to be Bijan Robinson. Same to you. I think we're all aboard Bijan. What could possibly go wrong here? And I think that along with what you said, Bijan's been much better than perception recently. He has a 21% target share for the Falcons since their bye week. And he also has 5 out of 15 red zone targets. So really good role in that span. 13.5 carries and 5.2 targets per game in his full games for the full season. And he's shown good upside. It's a must-win game for the Falcons, playing against their hated rival, the New Orleans Saints. So motivation, no factor here. Saints 19th against the rush. I also do like Aaron Jones and Zamir White as like lower salary plays, and I'm fine with them if you want to save a bit more. But I think the total package for Bijan Robinson at $6,900 is too good for me to pass up. So Bijan Robinson, a firm love for me this week. Let's go to wide receiver. Who are you focusing on there?
DK Metcalf. I still have some concerns because I think that Arizona can keep the ball away from Seattle a bit, but I'm still kind of waiting for a true late season breakout from Metcalf, which is weird because he did put up 34.4 against the Cowboys somewhat recently, but and he's had double-digit FanDuel points in 4 straight games since then. But there's still more here for Metcalf based on the underlying data. 19% target share the past 4 games with Kenneth Walker back. I don't think that's indicative of anything. It's just more like things have been sort of bad, and it's still pretty solid for Metcalf. The matchup's too good. He's indoors. 4.4 downfield targets per game since the bye. 1.7 red zone targets per game since the bye as well. There's a lot of potential here. Hard to envision a better scenario, and hard to envision DK Metcalf not being a focal point for them this week. Second love, as always, Chris Olave. If I ever don't have Olave and Rashad White in the loves, something's wrong, I think. But past 2 weeks with Olave and Rashid Shaheed, but no Michael Thomas have been really good for Olave's overall workload. 26% target share, 9.5 per game, 74.5 yards per game, 4 downfield targets per game. Not the best red zone role in this split, but he's getting targeted in this sample on 28% of his routes, which is absolutely elite. Saints need a win here facing a non-elite pass defense, so I'm going to take that and not overthink it. Third love, we talked a lot about like the Jaden Reed to Tyler Lockett sort of range, but I do think DeAndre Hopkins stands out. Is worth his own sort of call out, although I'm more likely to play Chris Godwin in a single lineup. But I like the fact that Hopkins can be stacked here a little bit this week, but he's got single game target shares recently of 36%, 33, 35, 17, and 28%. Jags are 32nd and 8 out allowed to receivers. 12th in target per route rate among receivers on the year is DeAndre Hopkins, and he's got, believe it or not, a 35% red zone target share, which is wild because he doesn't have a ton of touchdowns necessarily. And he's got 48% of their end zone targets. End zone targets are a little like, I don't say they're fluky, but
Small sample.
Small sample, but boy, that's nice.
48 is pretty good.
Yeah. I think you could do way worse than Hopkins. And just to clarify, I didn't really find a whole lot of receivers below like 67 that I like. So I'm probably going to try to play like 3 guys at DeAndre Hopkins salary and above in my main lineup.
I think it's a very fair approach for this week. One of those guys for me will be DK Metcalf at $7,600, similar to you. Since their bye week, a 24% target share, but a 38% deep target share and 45% inside the red zone. Mentioned before, 90 plus yards in 4 of those games. He's had 75 yards indoors, 94 and 134. Just let the Seahawks play indoors and play while trailing at all times, and they can be very fun. It's a must-win game, so I like Metcalf a lot here. My second love is Chris Godwin. He didn't do a lot in the first game against the Panthers, actually literally nothing, but overall the usage has been up for Godwin. He's finally starting to show some yardage upside. His salary is $6,900. It's a guy with a good path to potentially double-digit targets. I would jump off if Baker Mayfield can't go, and I think looking at Hopkins, looking at Ridley, what?
You would jump off of something if Baker Mayfield couldn't go.
What do you mean? He's the best quarterback in football. Of course, I'm going to lower the entire offense. Gosh, you're so disrespectful to the best.
I think you'd jump off your couch in like an act of defiance.
I would. I'd try to break my ribs in solidarity with Baker.
slightly sprain your ankle.
If I'm wincing a bit next week, you know why. My third love is Drake London. He has a 24% target share since the bye week for the Falcons, 43% deep target share, which is actually 2.5 deep targets per game, or 2.3, 2.25 or 2.5. Either way, it's one or the other. He's actually getting legitimately downfield targets with a 20% red zone share, but he's not scored since October 1st. It has been 3 months since this poor boy has been in the end zone. Free Drake London. He is due for some regression. It's a high motivation game. It is indoors. Still no Marshawn Lattimore for the Saints. So gotta love Drake London as my favorite guy below the Hopkins tier. I will probably wind up here. I would probably need a full practice from Christian Kirk on Friday in order to like really, really adore him. If he plays but does not get in a full practice, I'm willing to be underweight on him in tournaments if that happens. I think that's
what if he's like. What if he's full, but there's reports like, hey, he's not going to play a full allotment of snaps?
Then I'll be underweight in tournaments.
Okay.
Well, full indicates to me he's probably going to be good to go. So
yeah,
even if there are those reports. Also, who's doing the reporting? Is it Adam Schefter? If it's Schefter, I trust it. If it's,
there's a lot of reporting.
If it's Tom Pelissero, I trust it. If it's Schefter or Pelissero, Jeremy Fowler's getting that trust. Some others are not. So like Shefty, Pelissero, Fowler, I'll trust it. If it's not them, I'll be a little skeptical, is what I'll say. Tight end, what you doing there before I get in trouble?
Jake Ferguson, salary 6,000, stacks with Dak Prescott. Bottom 2 pass defense matchup. His target share was still 16% last week when CeeDee Lamb was going nuts, but that was his first sub 20% target share in 5 games. He's been really involved. Not anyone who's like point chasing is going to look at trying to find ways to get to CeeDee Lamb, but really good matchup, really important game. Again, just Dallas is plus 430 to score more points than like 28 other or 27 other teams on Sunday. That's incredible. Second love is Dalton Kincaid at a salary of 5,700. Gets me access to that big game, big important game, not necessarily big like for sure back and forth high scoring game, but Since Dawson Knox returned, 19% target share, 33% of the red zone targets, 23.5% target per route rate. Very good for a tight end. Good overall for really any player. And Miami's not great against tight ends.
Yeah, I think Kincaid's a pretty good option. My favorite guy below 6,000 personally, but my two loves are Trey McBride and Jake Ferguson. McBride, 26% target share since Kyler came back. He's not getting a ton of high leverage work right now, but it's a good spot for them this week, given how good Seattle's outside cornerbacks can be. Kind of funnels more work to tight ends. That might be anecdotal, but whatever. We could probably get to McBride at 67, so I do like him. I think we could get a reminder of why we were so eager to use him earlier on this year. Second love, as mentioned, Jake Ferguson. Since the bye week, 6.7 targets per game, 18% target share. He's been getting more downfield work. He has a great matchup here. It's a massive, massive game, obviously. Hard not to like him. I would say Juwan Johnson, very in play if he gets into full practice by Friday. He's a bit banged up right now, but I think that Johnson, with the target share he's been getting, is pretty good. So if I need to save salary in order to get to a Dak CeeDee Lamb stack, Johnson might be the first guy I turn to at $5,400, $300 below Kincaid at 57. Defense, what you going with there?
Just going to be hunting for backups. I have the Rams right now, 3,600. They're not playing everyone, so there's a little bit of that concern. But the 49ers aren't playing everyone either. I think that's reasonable. Don't mind the Raiders at 37. Cincinnati 4,000 even.
Yeah,
I think I'm going to prefer yours more than anyone, but I want to kind of give
Cincinnati's facing a guy with a lot of revenge on his mind. They tried to convert the opposing starting quarterback to a wide receiver. Let us not forget, because I bring it up every 5 minutes. Well,
you bring it up every 5 minutes.
Technically, it ruins the story, but he did volunteer to switch to receiver, and that does ruin the story. But I'm going to go with a massive revenge game for Jeff Driscoll against the Bengals. My love is the Chargers. They're a terrible defense. They're the worst, but they're facing Blaine Gabbert. The Chiefs have not been a good offense, even with Patrick Mahomes this year. So what? He's awesome.
They haven't been a good offense?
So they have. No, you're right. They're 10th in overall efficiency, 13th passing. But if they didn't have Mahomes, they'd be like DFL contenders.
Yeah. But that's...
Haven't been great. Great.
Okay.
Haven't been great. If you take away Mahomes, they'd be DFL.
I believe you said they haven't been good. Your notes say elite. They haven't been elite. But then it changed to they haven't been good.
I'm not reading my notes verbatim. You don't control me. Their salary is $3,300 for the Chargers. It's Blaine Gabbert, man. Like, I think the spread is too far in the Chargers' favor because they're also starting Easton Stick. But like, yeah, I think the Chargers are fine for $3,300. Any final thoughts for you, Brandon, before we close up shop on Week 18 and the regular season as a whole?
Stay tuned to the news because we're going to get reports on who's playing more, who's expected to see a big workload. But just because someone's playing a big workload doesn't mean that they're going to do much with it. So just study up, but kind of ultimately trust yourself. You can build lineups this week without relying on Week 18 replacements. I'm trying to do that. It's my preference, and it's very possible.
Yeah. And I think that what you want to ask yourself, if it's like a running back, is even at a low salary, is does this player have a path to 18 FanDuel points? Like 16 to 18 is like, I prefer 20, but like if you can talk yourself into 18, then it's okay. If you're thinking, best case scenario is like 13 to 16, that's where I'd say look elsewhere. You've got lower salary guys with good roles, like Zamir White, potentially, if there's no Josh Jacobs, like Bijan, other guys too. So I think that's where I'd want to lean there. That is all that we have here for today. But as mentioned, we are back with you for the postseason as well. Same time, same place, 10 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page to get you set for the wildcard round and other rounds as well. Make sure you're subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube page. If you like what you hear, give us a thumbs up there. You can also subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or over on Spotify. You can also find our shows over on FanDuel TV Plus. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm on Twitter at Gdula13, GDULA13.
And I'm on Twitter at Jim Sonnes, JimSannes. You can find me on Threads at Jim.Sonnes. You can find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. I want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with Week 18 lineups. Enjoy the final week of the regular season and the postseason just around the corner. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.